Hi there, this is Stephen Roselle, Senior Technical Specialist at Autodesk, and I'm going to cover the most recent improvements to QuadDraw and Make Live for creating secondary surfaces or retopoing existing surfaces, maybe creating LODs from a high-res object. What we have here is basically a character with a body mesh, a face mesh, and then I've got this kind of secondary head sock that goes around the head, which is basically kind of a buffer between helmet and the character's head itself. So I'm going to actually use the QuadDraw workflow to build something along these lines. So let's hide that, and we'll go into the Make Live tool, and we'll make the head the live surface. And now that means that when I go into QuadDraw, then I will be able to drop down points directly on this surface. And as I drop down those points, they will conform to the surface. I can rearrange them after the fact, hold shift, drag over them, and it will generate my quads. In the latest update, we have added a mesh color, and we've also added a customization to that, so I can set it to any arbitrary color that suits my needs, as well as setting the alpha. I can dial that up and down, and then I can also disable and enable things like the wireframe. We also get much better sorting now, so you can see that I get a nice overlay of the QuadDraw mesh. So let's go back a couple of steps and I'll talk about some other things we can do. One is we can use secondary objects and conform those to the live object in order to start off with something rather than starting from scratch. So I'm going to take this object here and select it, and then I'll go into the conform tool. And what the conform tool allows me to do is essentially shrink wrap the surface on top of a live object. Now we could use the conform, or rather the shrink wrap deformer, but in this case we don't want to use that because we actually want to use the live surface as kind of the way of the mechanism for conforming the mesh. So if I reset this, I'll show you the old method. The old method would basically do a closest point match. So we'd have problems where we would match things like the ear accidentally instead of the skull because of the proximity. Now we have the option of switching to along normals so that it will actually conform based on the normals of the head in this case. So likewise, I'll do the neck, and then we'll isolate select these, and you can see that they do indeed conform pretty closely to the head and the neck. Now we can also use other objects. So I can, if I want, select the body and I can make that live, and now I'll be able to switch back and forth between the body and the head. So for instance, I could actually go in here and I could grab this other mesh. Let's actually try to select this one here, and I'll isolate select that. Grab the lower portion of that, and then now when I conform, you can see it's going to conform to the torso, or rather the suit itself, as opposed to the neck of the main head mesh. So I can go back and forth as I need to. So one thing I want to do now is use these as a starting point for my QuadDraw. So I'm actually going to combine these into a single mesh, and now when I go back into QuadDraw, what you could see is that they'll immediately become part of the QuadDraw mesh. Now it uses the same drawing mechanism, but this is now actually a starting point for the QuadDraw. So I could continue to go in here and add detail by using something like insert edge loop, or I can go in here and I can drop down points directly on the surface and then begin to combine them together. Now, since I have symmetry, of course, I can actually go in here, and in the modeling toolkit, I can enable my symmetry, or I can use my marking menus. I'm going to turn on my X symmetry, and I'll basically start to drop some points down along the chin so that they basically follow the contour of the chin. So you can see those snap pretty closely down to the jawline rather. And I'll just continue this up around the ear and up kind of along where the sideburns would be. I can adjust the points on the existing mesh if I need to match those better, and then if I hold shift, I can start to just click drag and kind of draw those new quads in place. If I make a mistake, I can undo that last step, and then I can just continue that, and if I get a little sloppy, it's not a big deal. I can just kind of undo it and redo it. So now I want to go in and extend this in a couple of different ways. So I can continue to add points. I can continue to refine these points to change the flow. But I can also go in and I can hit the tab key and I can extend any one of these edges, either the edge itself. So with my marking menu, I can switch the extend into loop or border mode, and I can basically take all these simultaneously and begin to extend those out. So let me actually give myself a little bit more room to work with here. I'll hold tab, I'll extend those out, and then I'll begin to stitch these together either at the edge level or at the vertex level. So if I get close enough, those will just snap right into place based on a preference that I have set or an option that I've set. So something along these lines, that's actually starting to look pretty good. So now I might want to go in and fill some gaps here. So I might want an edge there, I might want an edge here. But I also might want to use this existing edge loop. But once again, I'll hold tab, just kind of click drag that down. And you can see there that now I can begin to basically match these points. I actually kind of overshot that a little bit. Let me try that one more time. Pull this down like so. And now I'll just start to, once again, stitch these together. Once they get within a certain range, they'll just auto stitch based on that setting. So let's actually undo that one here, and then I might want to go ahead and snap that there to get rid of that extra triangle. And then if I hold my shift, I can start to smooth those. If I accidentally kind of miss the edge there, it's not a big deal. I can just go in and restitch it. Now I hold shift, and I could start to basically smooth this out and kind of adjust the flow of the edges and adjust basically the spacing so that they're a little more even as they go across the skull there. Something along those lines. So where it gets a little tricky is this area here around the ear. So I can start to kind of position these around the ear, but I'm going to have to fill that hole at some point. Now, I can try to use the ear to snap directly to, but that could be tricky. So one thing I can do actually is I can just quit out of the quad draw tool, and I can disable the constraint here, and I'll just isolate select this head, or rather this mesh, and then I'll go back into quad draw. And that will, again, become kind of the active mesh. And now what I want to do is just start to drop down these points. And what you could see that is as I drop down these points, those points are actually dropping onto kind of a virtual piece of geometry. So I can start to adjust the existing points, and then I can start to add new points as I need to. And I'm just kind of eyeballing this for now. I don't know exactly what I'm doing. But now I can start to kind of fill these in. And again, it will just snap to basically an invisible mesh. So it kind of predicts where the mesh would be and then snaps to that essentially. So I might want to go in here and maybe add a piece of geometry there and possibly here. And then I can just kind of continue this process until I get something that I'm happy with. So another thing I might want to do is actually go in and start to split these up a little differently once I create them. So I'm going to add maybe a couple more here and possibly here, and then I might want to adjust these a little bit. And again, I'm not probably going to get this 100% perfect on the first try. I might need to experiment here a little bit with where I place these points until I get something that looks reasonable. And there I basically was able to fill it with all quads. But another thing I can do is I can start to add extra detail using the multi-cut tool. So I'm actually going to go back in and make my head, or rather the head mesh, the live object once again. I'll just go back, reactivate my quad draw tool, bring everything back. And for now, I'm actually going to use the shift to basically kind of smooth these out like so. You'll notice that they're snapping very closely to the ear. One thing that I can do is I can kind of re-shrink wrap this. So let me undo that last step. And what I'm going to do is actually re-shrink wrap this so that it conforms just outside of the head. So I'm going to go into the conform tool and turn on a little bit of an offset here. I'll use a value of 0.3 and I'll conform. And now you'll see that that now rests just outside of the surface of the head. Or the boundary there of the head. And I can also use that with quad draw. So when I go into the quad draw tool, it has the same surface offset options. So if I hold 0.3, for instance, now if I were to go in and begin to add some more points, you can see that as I add those, it maintains that same exact offset. So I don't really need that face there. I was just showing that as an example. But it also applies to relax, so that as I use the relax tool is going to basically kind of use that same, or if I reposition, it's going to use that same snapping kind of offset value. So something along these lines. Now, like I said, I'm not going to get this 100% perfect just here on the fly. But if I did want to start to add some more kind of freeform cuts, what I can do is switch over quickly into the multi-cut tool. And the multi-cut tool now works with quad draw almost as a companion tool. So I can start to add more kind of freeform cuts in here, maybe following kind of the boundary or perimeter of the ear, and then ending maybe at a point or a triangle instead of at a quad. And now as I insert that detail, you can see that it starts to snap to the ear. So now it's just a matter of going kind of back and forth between quad draw and my multi-cut tool. So now I'm going to take these points here. Actually, I got some extra points there. I'm not quite sure how. And now I can start to tweak these. If I can actually get in and grab that point, grab the edges. There we go. Now, one thing I might want to do is actually use a soft select in conjunction with this. So right now, those are kind of loosely conforming to the shape of the ear, but let's say I wanted to go in and start to move several points around at the same time. If I hold B, I can actually use the soft select tool, and I can basically move a whole series of points kind of simultaneously to get kind of these broader edits. And I can go back and forth between holding shift and using soft select in order to kind of redistribute these points. So something like that, now it's conforming a little bit better to the ear, and then I can use kind of soft select to pull that away. And I might want to go back again to the multi-cut tool at some point to maybe add a triangle here and kind of, again, just continue this kind of similar kind of edge flow. Now that popped out a little bit, but I'll just go back into quad draw and I'll kind of pull that out, maybe turn off soft select just to get that one vertice and so on. So you get the basic idea. It would take me a while to really kind of massage that to get it to exactly how I want it to look. But along the way, I can start to add more detail. Again, adding it, say, maybe in places where I'm starting to notice that I need it. And then I can always go back in and reconform at any point in order to kind of get that back in line with the surface. So that's kind of a rough example. I need to do a little bit of polishing there with the ear, but the end result would look something along the lines of the head sock that I was showing before, which I had hidden in the outliner. So I'll just come in here and I'll unhide that, and you can kind of get an idea. So this one actually I spent a little bit more time on kind of refining the shape and refining the edge flow around the ear, but it's the same basic workflow. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of what you can do with Quad Draw, and with Make Live, it's come a long way, and there's some really powerful workflows that are built around it. All right, thanks for your time. Take care. Bye.